In my Mets Untouchable Prospects video, which if you haven't seen already, I encourage you to check it out because that video took a lot of work and I like the way it came out. My man Unslab23 said, could you do a video on the free agents that he said the meat, but really the Mets should sign. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the other free agents that are available right now that would be good fits for the Mets that I would like to see them personally get. The Mets would like to stay under the luxury tax, so I try to keep that in mind when talking about these players. But if there's a video you want to see, make sure to comment that down below. I still have some more videos that I will be working on that also was requested, so I didn't forget about you other guys. I will do those other videos. Comment down below what players would you like to see the Mets get, whether that's in center field or third base or starter or reliever or backup pieces for the bench. I'm also going to talk about that later on in this video. So a lot of stuff to cover. So let's get into it. Make sure to do all the good stuff. Like, subscribe, makes my day. Working our way towards 900 subscribers. So I really appreciate all the support I've gotten from all of you guys and looking forward to keep growing the channel. So I really appreciate it. Let's talk about it. So where we will start is center field, and I know that in the last video we talked about the George Springer versus Jackie Bradley. We did a whole big thing on it. I was surprised how many guys said Jackie Bradley, but you know, I'm perfectly fine with that. But we're not going to go into in-depth again, but we know the difference between the offense and the defense, the differences with the contracts, not only money-wise, but years-wise. But the guy I want to talk about today in particular for center field is Kevin Pillar. He's someone that a few of you guys suggested, and I agree with you, because Kevin Pillar is right-handed. What I find very fascinating is that on Monday, Sandy Alston said that the lineup kind of is too left-handed already, especially in the outfield. So going after a right-handed outfielder that is going to be a much less cost than George Springer, maybe less than Jackie Bradley, we'll see. Kevin Pillar would be a very solid option. Kevin Pillar had a .288 average in 2020. He's 32 years old, but he had 21 home runs and 87 runs driven in 2019, and he plays some good defense. Back in his heyday in Toronto, Pillar would consistently make really good catches. In 2019, he made a ton of great catches for the Giants, and in 2020, he made some nice catches as well. So this is a guy that can play solid defense. He is right-handed. He can hit for average. He can hit for a little bit of power. Shouldn't cost too much. You don't need to sign him for 5 years. I think he would be a great fit for the Mets. So if the Mets don't want to give all their money to George Springer and they don't want to stay too left-handed and they want a hitter that's a little more consistent than Jackie Bradley, Kevin Pillar would be a very solid option. I would be perfectly happy with the New York Mets getting him. Now, there is another scenario the Mets could go in center field, and that is not get a center fielder. They could leave Nimmo in center and Dom Smith in left because Sandy said he would like to see Dom Smith play. Even though left field is not ideal, if there is no DH, you don't want Dom Smith on the bench. His bat is too good to be on the bench. So you could keep Nimmo in center field and Dom Smith in left field, but you would like some defensive replacement options late in games for center field to move Nimmo over to left. And those guys that are out there, the Mets have had them already. Jake Marisnick and Billy Hamilton. Those two guys, they could play a good center field. We don't love their offense, and we don't love their consistency, whether it's Marisnick, who got hurt too much, and Billy Hamilton making too many boneheaded mistakes on the bases. The other option is Albert Almora Jr., who is a guy that used to hit for some average. Lately has not been hitting quite as good. Still could play some good center field. Still is very young. I don't know what kind of contract he would be looking for, but if you want him just to be a backup outfielder, Almora would not be a bad option either. If you wanted, like I said, to keep Nimmo, keep Dom Smith, at least for this year, because next year's the DH, so then you could look at center field again. But for just this year, if you had Nimmo in center and Dom Smith in left, you could focus more on pitching, maybe more on third base, which we'll get to next. I don't see why not, because at third base, the guy I have circled is DJ LeMahieu. And I think that LeMahieu makes a ton of sense for this team. This is a guy that I think is one of the best players in all of baseball. I mean, he was a top 3 MVP finalist in 2020 and a top 4 MVP finalist in 2019. Okay, so this guy hit .364 in 2020, .327 in 2019. He could play second base really well. He can play some third base, not his best position, not somewhere he plays often, but I feel like he could get it done for the Mets just because his bat is so good. You just plug him in at third base. DJ will be turning 33 in July, but because 2020 was even better than 2019, he has shown me no signs of slowing down. He is out there pretty much every day. He gets it done all the time, whether it's the playoffs. I mean, he's just very consistent. He's not a streaky hitter. He always hits. DJ LeMahieu is currently seeking a 5-year, $110 million contract, so it's less than what George Springer is looking for money-wise, but the 5 years still is a little bit of a concern because you don't know where this Mets team is going to be from now. Steve Cohen said 3 to 5 years World Series. So what does this team look like in 3 to 5 years? Not now, not next year, but 3 to 5 years, what does this team look like? Because you want to do extensions that we've talked about with Lindor, Conforto, Syndergaard. Eventually, you like to extend Alonso, maybe McNeil, some of these other players. Do you want to extend Marcus Stroman if he has a good year? You never know. You never know how this team is going to look in 3 to 5 years. So do you still want to be paid DJ LeMahieu that much money in his mid-30s to high 30s? Not ideal, but he would make this lineup really, really good. He is right-handed, so it is something to consider because it does cost less than Springer, and maybe it allows you to get a couple other pitchers, whether it's another starting pitcher at a low level or a couple other relievers. There are so many relievers out there we're going to get to later on that I would like to see on the Mets, but DJ LeMahieu, I would be perfectly fine with them signing him. I would like to see it, but we'll see what they end up choosing. The next thing I want to talk about is starting pitching, because as of right now, the Mets rotation of DeGrom, Carrasco, Stroman, David Peterson, and as of right now, Steven Matz is the number 5 pitcher, at least until June when Noah Syndergaard should come back. So you would like somebody else in the rotation that is a little better. You don't want to bank on Stroman being really good and healthy. You don't want to bank on Steven Matz bouncing back. You like to have some other options. So 2 guys that are out there, veterans, James Paxton and Corey Kluber. We talked about them before. Paxton and Kluber could still provide some value. Corey Kluber had his showcase today, and scouts liked it. Fastball was high 80s to low 90s, which, I mean, Corey Kluber isn't going to throw that hard, but they said his stuff looked okay as far as the secondary pitches. He only threw 30 pitches in a bullpen session. Like, for me, that's not enough. 30 pitches in a bullpen session means nothing to me because Corey Kluber only made 1 start last year, so I need to see him for the entire season. I don't mind the Mets getting him if it is an incentive-based deal, only a 1-year contract. And who knows, I think Corey Kluber could give Steven Matz just enough of a push to see who the number 5 starter could be. And if you get the best version of Corey Kluber, all of a sudden you have a number 2 pitcher. So, I mean, it definitely could work out now that you have added Carrasco. My thing was that Corey Kluber cannot be the only starter you added. The fact that you added Carrasco has changed my opinion on Corey Kluber. I am much more okay with the New York Mets signing him. It wouldn't be as much of a problem to me as it would be had they not gotten Carrasco. Another guy that really stands out to me, and plenty of you guys have mentioned him in the comment section, is Taijuan Walker. I think that Walker would be a great fit for this team because here's a guy that had a 2.70 ERA in 2020. Before 2020, Taijuan Walker's ERA was in the mid-3s. The guy's only 28 years old. I don't know exactly what his market is like. I'm not sure what kind of contract he's looking for. We don't know how many teams are interested. So as long as the money isn't crazy, like if you still wanted to perhaps get DJ LeMahieu or get Walker and some relievers and maybe some bench pieces, we have to see what his contract looks like before making that decision. One more guy as a depth option as a number 6 starter, and to give Matz a little bit of a push, is Gio Gonzalez. Gio Gonzalez was not great in 2020, but he was good in 2019, and he always has pitched well in Citi Field, so maybe that could translate still. I think that he would not cost a lot of money at all. Again, 1-year deal, and just to have somebody else, because if something doesn't go right, if a starting pitcher gets hurt, you need someone to make starts. You would like for it to be Gio Gonzalez. You don't want it to be Corey Oswald or Ariel Gerardo or even frankly Kilome, because he did not do good in the major leagues this season. Maybe a couple years down the road, Kilome would be a good pitcher, but as of right now, he has not proven that to me quite yet. So I'd rather have someone a little more established on the big league level like Gio Gonzalez. Now, the bullpen is the interesting one because there are so many options out there and a lot of guys that I would really like to see the Mets pick up because so many of these guys are still unsigned. The guy I've talked about a lot and a lot of you guys would also like is Brad Hand. Left-handed, 2.05 ERA in 2020. He is a 3-time All-Star. The one downside to Brad Hand is the bad playoff game against the Yankees. Other than that, he makes a ton of sense for this Mets bullpen. Put him in the back end like we talked about with Diaz, May, and Lugo. Boom, Mets have a nice back end of the bullpen. I would love to see Brad Hand on this team, but like I said in my Liam Hendricks video, it's going to be tougher to get him now. More teams are going to be in on Brad Hand. They're going to increase their offers. As of right now, it looks like the Mets want to give Hand a 1-year deal, and Hand is looking for a multi-year deal, which I feel like he could get from other teams because he isn't that old compared to some of these other relievers we're going to get to. So I hope that the Mets do increase their offer. If not, again, there are a bunch of options out there, so they still could make their bullpen better. It definitely is not great right now. It still could and should be upgraded because in the playoffs, you're going to need a lot of different pitchers pitching for you throughout the series. So the Mets having multiple arms they could count on would just make the Mets an all-around much better team and much more suited for the postseason. One guy that stands out to me is Kirby Yates. I know he was not good in 2020 and he had his injuries, but before that, in 2019, I mean, this is a guy that had a 1.19 ERA and in 2018 a 2.14 ERA, one of the best relievers in all of baseball. So how could you not want Kirby Yates? Again, make it incentive-based, 1-year deal, see what happens. If he doesn't accept that, if other teams want to give him more money, you let him go. You just hope that he would be a solid reliever that you could trust more than perhaps a Jerry's Familiar or Brad Brock or Miguel Castro. Another guy that is very intriguing to me is Alex Colomé. He had a 0.81 ERA in 2020, so he was lights out. And before that, he's been a good reliever. I imagine his market is going to be pretty good too. He is going to get a nice contract. So I don't know if that's where the Mets want to put all their money. It looks to me that the Mets are being smart with the bullpen. Mountain Fisher in my Liam Hendricks video commented about just how inconsistent relievers could be and how you think you have someone that's really good and all of a sudden they don't turn out well. So you don't want to give these relievers multi-year deals because all of a sudden you'd be like, oh my gosh, what a mistake we made. Mets are saying that with Jerry Familia. Mets are saying that with Dylan Betances. So you don't want to do that again. The Mets wanting to do one-year contracts for relievers makes a ton of sense with me. I agree with it. As much as I would like Colome, if another team's going to pay him a lot of money, the Mets have other things they want to do, especially with trying to maintain their young core. Archie Bradley is another good option. He finished the season strong with the Reds at 1.17 ERA. How could you say no to that? Still in his 20s. Trevor Roosevelt had 9 scoreless outings with the San Diego Padres when they acquired him. He had a bad playoff outing against the Dodgers, but other than that, he looked really good in 2020, so he's another guy you would like to consider. Roberto Osuna has been fantastic throughout his career. I just don't like him off the field with domestic violence, but you know what? The Yankees have guys like Chapman and Domingo Germán, so domestic violence isn't a big deal for everybody. Personally, I don't want guys with domestic violence on my team. That's just me personally. Despite the domestic violence, Ozuna is a very good pitcher, so I could understand why a team like the Mets or other teams would want him for his on-the-field performance. Brandon Workman had a bad 2020, but he has been good in years past, so he's someone you could look at. Ken Giles, he had a bad 2020 as well and some injuries, but he was great in 2019, so he's another guy you could look at. Tilo, who pitched with the Pirates, he had a bad 2020, but he's been good in the past, so there's a lot of guys that you could see the risk involved. You're counting on bounce-back years, and there are relievers that could be every other year, but it is just such a tough thing to predict. Now, so the Atlanta Braves have a few expiring free agent relievers that, personally, I think they could help out the Mets. Mark Melancon had a good year with the Braves, a 2.78 ERA. He is turning 36, but some other guys, Shane Green, he had a good year for the Braves, and Darren O'Day had a 1.10 ERA, but he is 38. What makes Darren O'Day good is not his velocity, so don't worry about his advanced age. He still has that submarine delivery, so no matter what, Darren O'Day is a tough guy to pick up no matter his age. So he is someone that if you can get him for a one-year deal without a lot of money, I'd be fine with it. It'd be better than having to face him with the Braves. So more solid relievers, Yasmero Petit, he's 36 years old, and Pedro Baez, 33 years old. Both have had good seasons. Both have had good careers. They could help out the Mets. If you're looking at lefty relievers, Jake McGee makes a ton of sense. He had a good year with the Dodgers. He had a good playoff outing. Tony Watson had a good year, but both of these guys, McGee's going to be 35. Watson's going to be 36. A lot of these relievers are getting older. Some in-house options to maintain is Justin Wilson, who was very good in 2019. 2020 wasn't too great, 3.66 ERA, but that's better than plenty other relievers out there. It's better than some of these other guys, Brandon Workman and Keela and Ken Giles, so maybe you would like to keep Justin Wilson. He should cost less than these other relievers that are out there, and he can perform as a Met, which, as I've said before, is not a guarantee with a lot of these other players. I wouldn't mind seeing the Mets bring back Chasen Shreve. He had a good year. He didn't finish the season well, but for the most part, Chasen Shreve helped out a lot. He'd go multiple innings, kept the Mets in games, and I just feel like he helped the team, and it wouldn't cost a lot. And then for fun, Oliver Perez, he had a good year with the Cleveland baseball team, and he's gotten plenty of strikeouts. He is going to be 40, but he's one of my favorite Mets, and if you could somehow get him on a minor league contract, I'd be all for that. I'd like to see Oliver Perez pitch again as a Met. Again, this is just for fun. This is not to make the Mets a championship caliber. Another position the Mets could upgrade is backup catcher, because I still don't love Tomas Nido, and one guy that stands out to me is Kurt Suzuki. He could give you an average in the 270s. In 2019, he had 17 home runs in 85 games, and he makes some nice defensive stops behind the plate. So I would like him more than Tomas Nido. Don't know what kind of contract he's looking for, but I'd at least give a call about him. As far as the rest of the bench, there are some players that the Mets could go after, because every now and then you need some guys to make starts in a long 162-game season. If there's any COVID, if there's any injuries, you could use some guys that could make starts, and you feel like, all right, well, our lineup still isn't going to be awful. It's not going to be an automatic out. At least this guy could play the position just for a couple games. Those players that stand out, number one for me is Asdrubal Cabrera. He was a very good Met. I mean, he played a different position every year he was with the Mets, played well when they were trying to make the wild card in 2016. Cabrera was a massive part of that. Despite being hurt, still played well. In 2019, he had 91 RBIs. He went to the Nationals in 2019 because the Mets didn't want him in the offseason, even though Cabrera wanted to come back. So maybe that's Sandy's here now, and it's different ownership. Maybe Cabrera will change his mind. And this is a guy that he could play first, he could play third, maybe he could still play second, but he still could swing a pretty good bat. So I wouldn't mind seeing Cabrera on the Mets again. Danny Santana is a little intriguing because he's a switch hitter. He could play everywhere. He was great in 2019, but he had a very bad 2020. So if you can get him, again, on a one-year deal, not a lot of money, I'd consider consider it. Tommy LaStella, he could play a few positions. He's from New Jersey. He was an all-star in 2019, and he could give you a 280 average and play pretty much all around the infield. Kike Hernandez plays everywhere, and he had some big hits for the Dodgers in the postseason, so see what he wants. He definitely could help out any team. Marwin Gonzalez is someone I've always liked. He could play a bunch of positions. He's a switch hitter. Had a pretty good year in 2019, 264 average, 15 home runs, 114 games. Wasn't great in 2020, but just a guy that could play multiple positions, and he could just do all right. Not an all-star, but at least he's better than some of the other players we've seen in New York Mets uniforms. I like Marwin Gonzalez better than Brandon Drury or Jose Peraza or some of these other guys that are in the minor leagues for the Mets right now. I think Marwin Gonzalez is better than them. Another utility player that can play a lot of positions is Brock Holt. I mean, he could play everywhere. He had a really good 2019, wasn't that great in 2020, was a little better when he went to the Nationals, but he's someone that, again, should not ask for a lot of money, so he's someone you could consider just to have a player that could play just about anywhere. This way, if you want to do double switches, or you want to move some players around, like we said, guys need days off or guys get hurt mid-game even, just to have someone like Brock Holt that could be like, are you need him to play second base today? You need him to play third base or the outfield? Just for like a few innings, he could get the job done. An in-house option from the Mets on the bench is Todd Frazier. Now, Frazier is a great guy, streaky hitter, very slow. If he comes back to the Mets, I don't want him to play. If they bring back Frazier, I want him to be in the dugout, cheering the Mets on, and that's it. I don't want Todd Frazier to do anything else. So those are the players that I would consider that I would not mind the Mets signing. Again, it depends on the contract, especially where the Mets are right now. The Mets don't want to go over the luxury tax. They still have some areas that could be worked on, like we said, center field and pitching and the bench. And a lot of these guys you can get for pretty cheap deals just for 1 year, just to have a complete balanced team. And then going forward, you could decide who do we want to extend, what positions do we want to upgrade, or what other moves can we make. And you would be able to do that if you got some of these lower level players and then just give all your money to George Springer. So until the next one, be safe, be smart, be healthy, and let's go Mets.